It's late. The kind of late where the world seems suspended, caught between yesterday and tomorrow. The city that never sleeps is restless tonight. Streetlights buzz faintly, their light pooling onto cracked sidewalks. A dog barks once in the distance, but it's not answered. Even the city's bravest have grown cautious. Curtains are drawn tight, locks double-checked, and still, there's no real comfort. How can there be when the danger isn't distant, isn't contained? It's here, woven into the fabric of the city, prowling its streets, choosing its moments. This is not the beginning of a horror movie. This is the reality New York faced in the summer of 1977. A city alive but not living. A city gripped by something invisible yet undeniably present. Each day began with a single, gnawing question: would tonight be different? Would the headlines tell the same story? Another life taken. Another family left shattered. Another night claimed by the darkness. They called him the Son of Sam. A name whispered with equal parts fear and disbelief. Who was he? Where did he come from? And why was he doing this? Questions that lingered unanswered, building a tension that the city's collective will couldn't break. The truth is, no one knew. All they had were fragments, a shattered window, a bullet casing, a letter scrawled with unhinged promises. But those fragments weren't enough. Not to stop him. Not to understand him. Not to make the nightmares end. Imagine being them. Imagine sitting in your home, the place you should feel safest, and wondering if tonight would be your turn. You'd done everything right. You avoided the empty streets. You parked your car in well-lit areas. You checked over your shoulder at every corner. But somehow, it still wasn't enough. Because he wasn't predictable. He didn't follow rules. And the only constant was his absence, until it was too late. Now ask yourself, what would you do? Could you live like that? Could you sleep knowing that just beyond your door, beyond your block, someone was watching, waiting? Someone who didn't care who you were, what you'd done, or how much you loved the person sitting next to you. Someone who only cared about the moment when your life became his next headline? And what about him? What makes a person cross that line? Was it something he was born with, something woven into his very being? Or was it something he became, piece by piece, over years of anger, rejection, and pain? When did David Berkowitz stop being a name on a birth certificate and start becoming the Son of Sam? The answers to these questions aren't simple. They never are. But the journey to find them is one we must take, no matter how dark the path. So we begin where all stories like this do, in the shadows, with whispers and half-truths. With a city trying to hold itself together while fear eats away at its core. This is not just a story about a man who killed. It's a story about a city that survived. About a search for justice that stretched across months of sleepless nights. About the faces, the lives, the people who became part of a nightmare they never asked for. Stay with us. Because this is not just a story about the past. It's a story about how we confront the unthinkable and what it means to find answers when the truth is almost too much to bear. Before the headlines, before the fear, before the name, Son of Sam, etched itself into New York's history, there was a child named Richard David Falco. Born on June 1, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York, his beginnings were unremarkable yet heavy with secrets. His birth parents, Elizabeth Broder and Joseph Kleinman, had their own tangled lives, and he was placed for adoption soon after birth. It was Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, a middle-aged Jewish couple, who took him in and renamed him David. For much of his childhood, David was described as ordinary, quiet, reserved, but intelligent. Yet those who looked closer saw the cracks. Teachers noted his struggles with anger and social interactions. He was prone to tantrums, quick to frustration. His parents tried to provide him with stability, but Pearl's health began to fail when David was just a teenager. When she passed away from cancer, his world fractured. David's relationship with his adoptive father became strained after Pearl's death. Nathan remarried, and David felt further isolated, adrift in a family that no longer felt like his own. He became withdrawn, turning inward. Those who knew him saw a boy struggling, but no one could have predicted what he was capable of becoming. After high school, David joined the U.S. Army in 1971, seeking discipline and a sense of belonging. For 3 years, he served, and by all accounts, he was a competent soldier. Yet, the structure of military life couldn't quell the storm within him. When he returned to New York, the city had changed, and so had he. He bounced between jobs, working as a security guard and later in the post office, but his personal life was a void. He lived alone in Yonkers, his social interactions minimal. It was during these years that his paranoia deepened. He became convinced he was being watched, manipulated, controlled. His mental state unraveled, and his fascination with fire and violence grew into an obsession. David began to hear voices. He later claimed they came from his neighbor's dog, a Labrador retriever named Harvey. These voices, he said, commanded him to kill. Whether these claims were real or fabricated to shift blame, the fact remains, this period of his life marked the birth of the son of Sam. The summer of 1976 was hot, unbearably so. But the oppressive heat was nothing compared to the fear that began to spread. It started with a single attack, a young woman, Donna Loria, gunned down in her car. The police saw it as an isolated incident, a tragedy, but not the beginning of something larger. They were wrong. It was July 29, 1976, a warm summer night in the Bronx. Donna Loria, an 18-year-old medical technician, was sitting in her car outside her apartment with her friend Jody Valenti. They were laughing, talking, savoring the quiet of the late hour. They didn't see him approach. They didn't see the shadow in the darkness until it was too late. He fired through the passenger window without warning. Donna was killed instantly, a single bullet striking her neck. Jody survived, wounded, but alive to recount the terror. In the chaos that followed, the gunman disappeared into the night, leaving behind no clues, only grief and fear. But the city didn't know what it was dealing with yet. To them, it was a random act of violence. Tragic, yes, but not the beginning of a pattern. They didn't know it then, but Donna Loria was only the first. He wasn't finished, not even close. In October of the same year, Carl Denaro and Rosemary Keenan were sitting in their car in Queens. They were young, carefree, enjoying the beginnings of a romantic evening. But then, the sound of shattering glass broke the night. Carl was shot in the head but miraculously survived. Rosemary escaped unscathed. They didn't see their attacker. No one ever did. Each attack followed a pattern. Couples, often sitting in parked cars, ambushed with no time to react. The weapon was always the same, a .44 caliber bulldog revolver. And each time, he vanished into the night without leaving a trace. The city began to take notice. Young people started avoiding isolated areas. Parents warned their children to come home early. Still, it wasn't enough. The attacks continued, each one more brazen than the last. In April 1977, the police received the first letter. Written in erratic handwriting, it was addressed to NYPD Captain Joseph Borelli. In it, the killer referred to himself as the Son of Sam, a name that would become infamous. He wrote of his hatred for women, his compulsion to kill, and his supposed obedience to the commands of a demonic force. I am a monster. I am the Son of Sam. I love to hunt. Prowling the streets looking for fair game, tasty meat. The women of Queens are the prettiest of all. I must be the water they drink. I live for the hunt, my life. Blood for Papa. The letter wasn't just a taunt. It was a declaration, a promise that the killing wasn't over. And true to his word, the attacks escalated. Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante, Alexander Esau and Valentina Suriani, their names joined the growing list of victims. By the summer of 1977, New York City was in a state of siege. The fear was palpable. People avoided walking alone at night. Businesses saw a drop in evening customers. Concerts and public events were sparsely attended, as no one wanted to risk being out after dark. For the first time in its history, the city that never sleeps was collectively holding its breath. Imagine living through it. Every knock on the door, every creak of the floorboards, felt like a harbinger of something terrible. And yet, despite the fear, life had to go on. People still went to work, still tried to carve out some semblance of normalcy, even as they felt the weight of an unseen predator lurking just beyond the shadows. The city was on edge, and the police were under immense pressure. The Son of Sam had become more than a killer. He was a phantom, a living nightmare that seemed untouchable. Each attack left the authorities scrambling for answers, yet every lead seemed to dissolve into nothing. But in July 1977, just as it seemed there would be no end to the terror, a single parking ticket cracked the case wide open. It was the night of Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante's attack in Brooklyn. Unbeknownst to the killer, a witness had seen something, a suspicious figure near a car shortly before the shooting. The car, a cream-colored Ford Galaxy, had been ticketed for parking too close to a fire hydrant. This seemingly minor infraction would become the thread that unraveled the mystery. The car was traced back to a man named David Berkowitz, who lived in Yonkers. As detectives delved into his background, they discovered disturbing reports from his neighbors. Complaints about his erratic behavior, strange notes left on their doorsteps, and, most chilling of all, allegations that he had been shooting neighborhood pets. Each piece fit together, painting a picture of a deeply troubled man. On August 10, 1977, police staked out his building, waiting for the moment to make their move. As Berkowitz approached his car, the officers closed in. He didn't resist. In fact, his first words to them were chillingly calm, "You got me." With the evidence in hand, there was no doubt. The man who had terrorized New York City for over a year had finally been caught. But as the investigation continued, the depth of his crimes, and his psyche, came to light. During questioning, Berkowitz confessed to the murders, providing chilling details about each attack. He claimed he was obeying the commands of a demon who communicated through his neighbor's dog. His words were erratic, veering between confession and delusion, leaving investigators questioning whether they were dealing with a calculated killer or a deeply disturbed individual. His claims of demonic influence captivated the public, adding another layer of horror to an already terrifying story. But while the media dissected his motives, the victims' families were left to grapple with their pain. In May 1978, Berkowitz faced trial for his crimes. Despite his erratic behavior and claims of insanity, psychiatrists deemed him competent to stand trial. Rather than prolong the process, he pleaded guilty to all charges, confessing to 6 murders and numerous assaults. His demeanor in court was bizarre, at times smirking, at others shouting about Satan and conspiracies. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms, with no possibility of parole. Justice, at least in the legal sense, had been served. But for the families of his victims, the scars would remain forever. In prison, Berkowitz's life took another strange turn. He claimed to have found religion, referring to himself as the Son of Hope. He wrote letters to his victims' families, expressing remorse, though many doubted the sincerity of his transformation. His writings, often focused on faith and redemption, became a source of fascination for some and skepticism for others. To this day, David Berkowitz remains behind bars, a man whose name is synonymous with fear. He has expressed regret, but the question lingers: can there ever be true redemption for someone who has caused so much pain? The story of the Son of Sam is more than a tale of terror. It's a reminder of how darkness can seep into the unlikeliest of places, how communities can endure unimaginable fear and still emerge stronger. It's a story of justice, resilience, and the questions we may never fully answer about the human capacity for both evil and redemption. Do you believe that some people are born with darkness in their souls, or is it something they become? Share your thoughts in the comments below.